On the day I asked my son why he had stopped visiting me, he cleared his throat, looked everywhere but my face, and finally muttered, "My wife doesn't like the smell of old people." And in that single moment, my world fell so silent I could hear my own heartbeat cracking inside my chest. Before we dive into this intense drama, take a moment to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to turn on notifications. Your support is my greatest strength. Drop in the comments where you're watching from, as it warms my heart when I hear how far my stories travel. Let's dive right into the story. I remember standing there in my small kitchen, the one with the faded yellow tiles and the kettle that always whistles louder than necessary, thinking that perhaps I had misheard him, that maybe my ears, those fragile little organs that age has already softened, had played a cruel trick on me. But no, he repeated it, softer this time, almost apologetic, as if lowering the volume of cruelty made it less cruel, and all I could do was grip the edge of the counter to stop my hands from trembling, because if I didn't hold on to something, I was afraid I might collapse right there on the cold linoleum floor. I am 62 years old, not ancient, not helpless, not decaying like something forgotten in a corner, yet the way he said it made me feel as though I had become some rotting inconvenience they were forced to endure. The smell of old people, as if age were a disease I caught on purpose, as if my wrinkles, my slow steps, my quiet afternoons were shameful stains on the bright, curated world he now lived in with his young, polished wife. I looked at him, my Daniel, the boy I once carried on my hip, the one whose feverish forehead I pressed cool cloths against at 2 a.m, the boy who used to cling to my skirt when he was scared of thunder. And now here he was, standing stiff in my kitchen like a guilty visitor, unable to meet my eyes, his arms crossed defensively as if preparing for battle. I wanted to ask him what I had done wrong, where I had failed him, what part of motherhood I had broken so badly that the child I raised with tenderness could now speak to me like a stranger, reciting someone else's rehearsed cruelty. But the words would not leave my throat. They sat heavy, like stones. His wife, Adana, had always been distant with me. Polite smiles, polite hugs, polite words, each one polished as if she had wiped fingerprints off them before handing them to me. She never let her true feelings touch the surface, but I felt them. Oh, I felt them in the way her eyes drifted over my thrift store dresses, my slightly stooped posture, my soft laugh that she never mirrored. I felt them in the way she tugged Daniel away from me during family gatherings, as if the air around me were slightly contaminated. Still, nothing prepared me for hearing that sentence spoken out loud. I wanted to sit, but I refused to show weakness, so I remained standing, clutching the counter until my knuckles turned white. "I see," I finally whispered, though I didn't see at all. I didn't understand how years of sacrifice could be boiled down to something as shallow as smell. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, sliding his hands into his pockets. "Mom, it's not personal," he said, and I almost laughed. One of those bitter, humorless laughs that rise out of disbelief rather than joy. Not personal? What could be more personal than your own child implying that your presence is unpleasant? What could cut deeper than realizing someone you created now considers you an embarrassment? "She just has sensitivities," he continued. "You know, scents, environments, textures. Little things set her off." I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling slowly. My kitchen smelled faintly of lavender soap, the stew I had cooked earlier, and the peppermint tea I made every night, a warm, lived-in scent, a comforting scent, home. There was no foulness here, no decay, only the traces of a woman who had spent decades building a life out of love and endurance. But I realized then that people like Adana do not smell homes. They classify them. They do not feel warmth. They measure it against their own standards and find it lacking. Daniel glanced at the door, already itching to leave, and that hurt more than his words, as if my home, once his sanctuary, had become foreign territory he could not wait to escape. "We're just busy these days," he added weakly. "Work, commitments, you know how it is." I nodded, though I knew the truth. They hadn't been busy, just avoiding me. I had spent the last 7 months waiting for a visit that never came. 7 months of birthdays, holidays, and Sundays passing like quiet, fading footsteps. 7 months of cooking meals he never tasted, of knitting sweaters he never received, of sitting alone at the small dining table that once held 3 plates, not one. 7 months of pretending to the neighbors that he was just busy, that young people nowadays live fast lives, that everything was fine. I had lied for him, for his dignity, for mine. Because admitting that your only child has abandoned you is an embarrassment no mother wants to wear. I opened my eyes and looked at him fully. His face had changed over the years, broader jaw, faint lines near the eyes, but it was still my son's face, the face I loved, the face I protected. And yet, in that moment, it felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my son's features. "Daniel," I said softly, and he looked up, startled by the steadiness in my voice. "Do you also think I smell like an old person?" He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. He didn't answer right away, and that hesitation was a dagger. "Mom," he finally muttered, "can we not make this dramatic?" Dramatic. If only he knew how much pain I had swallowed quietly, gracefully, without ever burdening him. "I just don't want arguments," he added. "Adana is sensitive, that's all." Sensitive. Such a beautiful word, misused like a weapon. Sensitive people do not wound others. Sensitive people do not isolate the elderly. Sensitive people do not forbid their husbands from visiting their mothers. "I understand," I said, even though I didn't. Daniel exhaled in relief, misinterpreting my acceptance as agreement. He straightened his shirt, dusting off imaginary lint, and said, "I'll call you soon, okay?" I nodded again, though I knew he wouldn't. He had said the same thing last Christmas, and the Christmas before that. He stepped toward the door, then paused. "Mom, don't be upset. It's not like I don't love you." I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides an entire ocean of tired tears. "Of course," I whispered. "I know." He kissed my cheek reluctantly, almost mechanically, and left. The door shut behind him, and the silence that followed was enormous. An echoing emptiness that pressed against my ribs until I felt something inside me fold. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door as if it might open again, as if he might come back and say, "I didn't mean it, Mom. I'm sorry." But the seconds stretched, the air stilled, and nothing happened. Eventually, I walked to the kettle, reheated the water, and made myself tea with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. I sat alone at the table where I once helped Daniel with homework, where we laughed, prayed, argued, and celebrated. The chair across from me was empty, and I realized something chilling. This was not loneliness. This was abandonment wearing the mask of maturity. And in that quiet room, with my tea growing cold between my palms, something inside me shifted, something subtle but profound, like a small flame flickering back to life in the ashes. I was hurt. Yes. Betrayed, absolutely, but I was not defeated. Not yet. Because age may wrinkle the skin, but betrayal wrinkles the soul, and those wrinkles teach you where strength truly lives. And I felt deep in my aging bones that this story was only beginning. After Daniel left that day, closing the door with the soft, almost guilty click of someone eager to escape, I sat in that silence for so long that the afternoon sun faded into evening and the shadows stretched long fingers across my living room floor. Hours passed, and still I sat there, staring at the empty doorway as if it could explain why a son's heart can shift so far away from the woman who once carried him beneath her own. Eventually, when the silence became too heavy to breathe, I stood up and moved through my house, touching the familiar things I had dusted and cherished for decades. The framed photo on the wall of Daniel on his first day of school, the wooden spoon I used to stir his favorite pepper soup every birthday, the old armchair where he used to curl into my lap during thunderstorms. Each object whispered memories, but instead of comforting me, they stung like tiny needles, reminding me of a time before his world became too polished, too curated, too full of a young wife who found people like me, old, ordinary, aging, unappealing. I didn't cry, not then. There are some moments when the pain is so heavy that tears refuse to come, as if your body knows that crying would only drown you. I simply moved through the house like a ghost, touching the things I used to believe would anchor me to him forever. And then, somewhere between setting the kettle to boil and sweeping crumbs off the kitchen counter, a memory rose in me like a warning, a memory of the last time things still felt right between us. It was almost 2 years ago, a rainy Saturday morning. Daniel had stopped by without warning, as he used to, before his marriage rewrote the script of his life. He came straight from the rain, dripping water onto my carpet, holding a bag of groceries and saying, "Mom, I brought things to cook for you." I remember how he hugged me then, warm and tight, the kind of hug a son gives when he still sees his mother as home. We cooked together that day. Jollof rice, fried plantain, steaming goat meat that filled the house with the kind of scent that pulls people toward each other. He laughed freely, teased me about how I always added too much pepper, and I teased him back about how he still couldn't cut onions without crying. That day, he stayed until evening, stretched out on my sofa with his head resting on the cushion like he used to as a child. He told me about work, stress, dreams. He told me he wanted to buy a house near mine so he could visit more often. That was before Adana entered the picture. I remember the first time he introduced her to me. She was beautiful, effortlessly so, with perfect nails, flawless skin, and a calm, calculating gaze that revealed nothing. She shook my hand with exactly the right amount of pressure, offered me a smile that did not reach her eyes, and called me Ma in a tone that felt practiced. I told myself not to judge too quickly. I told myself Daniel deserved love in any form it came, even if that form came wrapped in polished confidence and eyes that scanned my modest home with quiet disapproval. But now, replaying every moment with clarity that only comes after heartbreak, I saw every sign I had dismissed. I remembered the first dinner I cooked for them. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing, pounding yam until my arms throbbed, seasoning the soup just right, adjusting the tablecloth twice, then twice more. When they arrived, Daniel hugged me, but Adana hesitated, pausing just long enough to let me feel it before leaning in for a polite touch of cheeks. She walked into my kitchen and stopped abruptly, sniffing the air with a small wrinkle of her nose she tried to hide. She complimented the meal but ate little, each bite slow, deliberate, almost forced. After dinner, when Daniel went to the car to get something, she leaned toward me and said in a voice so sweet it nearly stung, "Ma, when we invite you to our place, we usually cook lighter meals. Daniel isn't used to such heavy spices anymore." It was then I first wondered, what else had she changed about him? But Daniel returned at that moment with a box of cake, smiling brightly, and the thought evaporated like steam. That night, after they left, I found her perfume lingering in my house, sharp, expensive, dominant as if marking territory. I shook off the thought, but now, standing alone in my kitchen years later, it no longer felt like imagination. The change had been steady, subtle, like erosion, silent until the cliff finally gave way and the ground beneath you disappeared. I finally sat down, my bones aching with hurt I didn't want to name. Night had settled fully, the cicadas humming outside my window, and I sipped my lukewarm tea as my eyes drifted toward the small wooden box on top of my shelf. It held letters, old photos, small keepsakes of the life that once felt whole. My husband, God rest his soul, had carved that box for our 20-year anniversary, telling me it would hold the things we never want to lose. I opened it slowly, and on top was a photograph of me holding toddler Daniel on my lap, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. I traced the edges of the picture, tears finally stinging my eyes. "When," I whispered to the empty house, "did my own child stop seeing me?" The question hung in the air like incense smoke, soft, lingering, unanswered. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion finally swallowed me, and I drifted into a restless sleep. But the next morning, when the sun filtered through the curtains in soft golden ribbons, I woke with something different in me. Not anger, not sadness, something firmer, something steady, resolve. Because if life has taught me anything, it is that pain becomes dangerous when left to rot. Pain must be faced, understood, named, and I needed to understand what had truly happened to my son. I needed answers, not assumptions. That morning, I bathed slowly, rubbed shea butter into my thinning skin, tied a soft wrapper around my waist, and brewed fresh peppermint tea. I sat at the table with a notebook, the same one I used to write recipes and groceries when Daniel was young, and on the first page, I wrote, "Why does my son stay away?" Then beneath it, I wrote, "Adana." My hand trembled a bit, but I kept writing. I listed every moment that felt wrong, every hesitation, every discomfort, every cold smile, every visit that grew shorter, rarer, forced, and then I circled one sentence. My wife doesn't like the smell of old people. Under it, I wrote in smaller letters. Where did she hear that? Because Daniel had not invented that sentence. That sentence belonged to someone else first. That thought unsettled me more deeply than anything. I closed the notebook, set it aside, and stood. If I wanted answers, I needed to stop waiting for them to come to me. I needed to look. I needed to see. I needed to visit the people who had slowly pulled my son away, not to beg, not to plead, not to accuse, but to understand. The first place I went was their home. Not to confront them, not yet, but to observe. I took a slow walk to the estate, pretending to be out for casual exercise. Their house was beautiful. Modern, cold, sterile. Even from the outside, it looked like a space that valued aesthetics over warmth. And I stood across the street, hidden behind a jacaranda tree, watching as Adana stepped out onto the balcony. Her hair perfectly styled, her dress expensive, her posture rigid, her expression sharp. She looked down at something on her phone, her face tightening before she sighed in irritation. Daniel joined her a moment later, placing a hand on her waist. She didn't lean into it. She didn't soften. She simply stood there, stiff, as if human touch were something she tolerated rather than welcomed. He spoke to her, his hands moving in small, frustrated gestures. She rolled her eyes at my son. Then she said something, and even from across the street I saw Daniel's shoulders fall. He nodded, and that small gesture, my son shrinking, folding into himself, ignited something hot inside me. A realization formed like a stone settling firmly at the bottom of a river. Whatever distance had grown between us, it hadn't grown naturally. It had been planted, watered, encouraged, manufactured. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. I turned away and walked home, each step measured. That night, I made a decision. Not to confront her, not yet, but to understand her. People like Adana do not change out of kindness. They change when truth corners them. They change when consequences are no longer optional. I was no longer the quiet, indulgent mother-in-law she thought she could dismiss like an outdated piece of furniture. No, I was a woman who had raised a child alone, a woman who had survived loss, hardship, aging, and now betrayal. And I would not shrink. I would not disappear. The next morning, I opened my notebook again, drew a straight line under my first notes, and wrote, "If she thinks old people smell, let her see what strength smells like." And as the sun climbed into the sky, warming the walls of my home, I felt something awaken in me, a quiet storm gathering strength. They had pushed me aside, but they had forgotten one thing. Mothers may bend, but we do not break. And this old woman was done being silent. The morning after I wrote those words in my notebook, words that felt like the slow, deliberate sharpening of a blade, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that was not quite grief and not quite anger, but something deeper, something older, something mothers rarely admit, the fear of losing a child forever. I sat on the edge of my bed, rubbing my palms slowly together as the early light crept across the room, illuminating the quiet disorder of a lived-in life. The reading glasses I had forgotten on the floor, the half-knitted scarf on the armchair, the framed photo of Daniel as a teenager, smiling with the fullness of youth and the weightlessness of innocence. How quickly time changes the shape of a person's heart. After breakfast, I tied my scarf, slipped on my comfortable flats, and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The birds were awake, the neighborhood was stirring, but inside me something felt still, focused, steady. I wasn't sure what I was searching for yet. Answers, understanding, evidence, maybe even hope. But I knew I couldn't find them sitting quietly in my home, waiting for someone else to fix what had gone wrong. Mothers may be patient, but we are not powerless. My first stop was a small cafe not far from Daniel's estate. I knew from the few conversations we had managed to squeeze out of him over the past year that Adana often stopped there for her favorite almond milk latte. It was the kind of habit people like her cultivated. Expensive, curated, predictable. I bought a cup of tea and sat by the window, pretending to read the newspaper while watching the entrance. Not 10 minutes later, she swept in like a gust of curated wind. All sleek hair, tailored dress, and a cloud of perfume that reached me even from across the room. She didn't notice me. I made sure of it. She stood in line, her posture as perfect as a sculpture's, scrolling on her phone with the same detached annoyance she carried everywhere, as if the world's imperfections were personally inconveniencing her. And as I watched her, this young woman who had somehow managed to wedge herself between me and my son, I studied her carefully, the way she frowned without noticing, the way she checked her reflection in the glass, the way she gave the barista a tight smile, though her eyes remained cold. This was not a woman who disliked the smell of old people. No, this was a woman who disliked anything that did not mirror her own polished existence. She collected things that made her feel elevated, friends, clothes, events, environments, and anything that did not fit her aesthetic, she quietly pushed away, like an object out of place. People like her fear imperfection more than they value connection. When she left the cafe, latte in hand, she spoke into her phone sharply. I couldn't hear her, but her expression told the story. Impatience, irritation, superiority. And as she climbed into her pristine black SUV, I finally understood something. This woman was not just influencing Daniel. She was controlling him. Not overtly, not loudly, but in small strategic doses of disapproval, subtle manipulation, quiet corrections, emotional punishments. She had taken my son, softened him, reshaped him, and now wielded him like a perfectly carved accessory. The realization stung, but it also clarified my path. Understanding was not enough. Watching from a distance was not enough. I needed to see the truth up close. I needed to hear it. And so, that afternoon, I did something bold, something I had never done before. I called Daniel and asked him to dinner at my house. Just the two of us, I added gently. There was hesitation on the line, heavy, thick, uneasy. Mom, Adana and I, just you, I repeated, my voice calm, steady, leaving no space for negotiation. He exhaled, and in that exhale I heard exhaustion, conflict, and perhaps, buried deep, a son who still missed his mother. Okay, he said finally, I'll come by around 7. When he hung up, I allowed myself a single, deep breath. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall that had kept him from me. I spent the next few hours cooking, not because I thought food could fix the wound, but because cooking grounded me. It connected me to the woman I had always been. Warm, patient, nurturing. The aroma of simmering stew filled the house, weaving through the rooms like a memory come alive. At exactly 7, a knock sounded at the door. I wiped my hands on my wrapper and opened it slowly. Daniel stood there, wearing a tired expression that startled me. His shoulders hunched slightly, his eyes shadowed, as if the life he was living no longer fit him comfortably. Mom, he said softly. And for the first time in months, he hugged me without hesitation. Not tight, not like before, but real. I held him a moment longer than necessary, savoring it. Come in, I whispered. He stepped inside and immediately scanned the room, an old habit, but now tinted with something new. Guilt. It looks nice, he said, though nothing had changed since the last time he bothered to notice. We sat at the table and ate in slow silence, each of us waiting for the other to speak first. Finally, as he chewed absent-mindedly, he said, Mom, about what I said the other day. Adana didn't mean it like that. Didn't she? I asked gently. He paused. His fork hovered above his plate. She's particular about things. Sensitive. Sensitive. That word again, as if it excused everything. Daniel, I said softly, do you believe what she said? He dropped his gaze. A muscle in his jaw twitched. It's not about belief, he muttered. It's about avoiding conflict. That sentence cracked something open inside me. Conflict with who? I asked. With her, he admitted, almost whispering. She gets upset when things don't go the way she wants. She gets really upset. I felt coldness spread through my veins. Upset how? His silence was the answer. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. He didn't pull away. Daniel, I said softly, are you happy? His eyes lifted to mine, and what I saw there broke me. Not anger, not defiance, not even guilt, but fear. A son afraid of displeasing someone who should have loved him without conditions. It's complicated, he whispered. That was enough. I didn't push further, not that night, not while he sat there eating the food I had cooked with trembling hope. He finished his meal, thanked me, hugged me once more, and left with a promise to return soon. I knew better than to believe it, Promises made by the fearful are not promises. They are temporary wishes. After he left, I sat at the table, staring at the empty plate he had used, and an ache settled into my bones. I understood now what was happening beneath the surface. This wasn't just distance. This wasn't just preference. This was control, subtle, quiet, methodical, and if I didn't intervene carefully, I would lose him completely, not because he wanted to leave me, but because he was being trained to. I slept poorly that night, waking repeatedly with the same thoughts circling my mind. I needed to learn more. I needed to see past the surface, past the rehearsed smiles and curated manners. People like Adana build facades, but they never hold up under pressure, and I intended to apply pressure. The next day, I began speaking to people, not gossiping, not prying, just listening. The hairdresser down the street had seen Adana once. A tense visit, she said, full of complaints and sighs. A neighbor had glimpsed them arguing inside the car one evening, Daniel's voice raised, Adana icily silent. Another acquaintance mentioned how she often spoke of leveling up, and how marriage was a strategic partnership as much as an emotional one. Each piece formed a disturbing picture, a woman who curated her environment, who polished her image, who corrected her husband quietly but firmly, who disliked anything she couldn't control, who associated age with decay, imperfection, clutter, who saw people like me, older, softer, unvarnished, as a threat to the glossy life she wanted others to envy. And I realized something chilling. Daniel hadn't abandoned me. He had been isolated, slowly, strategically. The kind of manipulation that doesn't feel like manipulation until it's already complete. That evening, I returned home, poured myself a cup of tea, and stared at my reflection in the window, wrinkled, soft around the edges, gray-haired, aging, but wise, so very wise. They could underestimate me, they could dismiss me, but they would soon learn something important about old women. We see what others miss, we hear what others ignore, and we remember what others forget. The battle was forming, not out of anger, but out of love, fierce, maternal love, and though they didn't know it yet, the storm was coming. Quiet, steady, inevitable. If you sticked around till now, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. It encourages me to create more heartwarming stories like this one. Enjoy the rest of the story. The day after gathering those whispers and fragments about Adana, the subtle complaints, the cold silences, the quiet arguments that carried through closed car doors, I felt something shift in my spirit, like a tide turning with steady, irresistible force. For the first time in months, I woke not with heaviness, but with intention. There is a difference, you see, between a mother in pain and a mother with purpose. Pain sinks, purpose stands. And that morning, as dawn stretched pale fingers across my bedroom wall, I knew it was time to stop grieving silently and start acting deliberately. I brewed my peppermint tea, stood at the kitchen window, and watched the street slowly fill with life. Children in uniforms trailed after their parents. Okada riders zoomed past with too much confidence. Elderly neighbors swept their front steps while humming to themselves. Life continued about its business, unaware that inside my chest, a storm was beginning to organize itself neatly, quietly, with all the precision of a woman who has been underestimated for far too long. I took out my notebook, the same one where I had written my first desperate question, and flipped to a fresh page. At the top, in neat handwriting, I wrote, "To save my son, I must understand my enemy." And though the word enemy felt heavy, almost dramatic, I let it remain because, truth be told, what else do you call a person who teaches your child to turn away from you? I sat there for nearly an hour, listing everything I had learned, every sign I had ignored, every shift in Daniel's behavior that aligned perfectly with Adana's preferences. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the page. The evidence was damning, but knowing wasn't enough. Not yet. What I needed was clarity, raw, unfiltered truth straight from Daniel's mouth, not the softened, half-truth versions he fed me out of guilt or fear. I wanted the truth he hid even from himself. And so, I decided the next time he visited, and he would visit, even if I had to pull him with the force of maternal insistence, I would ask him questions no one had ever asked him, questions that cut past his rehearsed answers, questions that dug into the heart of what was happening to him, but life rarely gives us the perfect opportunity. Sometimes it gives us chaos instead. It was late afternoon when my phone rang. I was folding laundry, humming an old hymnal that used to soothe Daniel when he was colicky, when the ringtone cut through the air sharply. When I saw his name, my heart jumped. "Daniel," I answered. His breathing was uneven, rapid. Something was wrong. "Mom, are you home?" "Yes, what is it?" A pause. Too long, too uncomfortable. "I'm coming over," he said quickly. I just need to talk, please." My chest tightened. That word, please, was not one he used with me often. I could hear the tension in his voice, the kind that comes from swallowing conflict for too long. "I'm here," I told him softly. "I'm always here." When he arrived 20 minutes later, he looked disheveled, frazzled, exhausted in a way that made my heart ache. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and the moment he stepped inside, he dropped onto the sofa with a heaviness that spoke volumes. "Daniel," I whispered, sitting beside him, "what happened?" He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaling shakily. "It's Adana," he said finally. My stomach tightened. "What about her?" His voice cracked, not with anger, but with something far more troubling: defeat. "She fought with me because I came here last night." "Fought with you?" I repeated slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded. "She said I'm wasting time, that I let you emotionally manipulate me into feeling guilty." Emotionally manipulate. The word nearly made me laugh, bitterly, humorlessly, because what manipulation exists in a mother's love except the instinct to protect? "And what else?" I asked gently. He hesitated. She said I should choose where my loyalties lie." My breath caught. "She said that?" "Yes." He leaned back, closing his eyes in exhaustion. "She thinks you're holding me back, that you make me regressive, that you remind me of things I haven't outgrown." A slow, cold anger spread through me, not loud, not wild, but quiet and steady, like a river deepening under the surface. "Daniel," I said softly, "look at me." He opened his eyes. "You are not a child outgrowing shoes," I told him. "You are a man with roots. No woman has the right to cut them." His lips trembled, and for a moment I saw the boy he once was, the one who'd climb into my bed after nightmares, the one who'd cling to my wrapper when crowds frightened him, the one who believed I could fix anything with a hug. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I love her, but I'm losing myself." I reached for his hand. He held it like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. "Tell me everything," I said. And he did, in halting, broken pieces. How she criticized his job for not being ambitious enough. How she corrected the way he spoke, the way he dressed, even the way he laughed. How she insisted they keep their home, youthful and modern, free of anything that looked dated, including his old photos with me. How she pushed him to distance himself from anything that didn't fit the sleek, upwardly mobile image she wanted them to represent. "She says aging brings clutter," he whispered. "Physical clutter, emotional clutter, and she doesn't want that in our lives." My hands tightened unconsciously. Clutter. So I was clutter to her, a mother, a home, a history, a life. "And the smell?" I finally asked, because I needed to hear him say it. He swallowed hard. "She said older people have a scent of decay, and that she's sensitive to it." My heart broke. Not because of the insult. I had been insulted before in life and survived, but because my son had carried those words inside him for months, letting them gnaw at the bond between us. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. "Daniel," I said calmly, "listen to me, carefully." He looked at me, eyes wet. "You are not choosing between two women," I said. "You are choosing between love and control, between roots and isolation, between who you are and who someone wants to force you to become." A tear finally escaped down his cheek. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "I'm scared of losing her." "And what about losing yourself?" I asked gently. Silence. Heavy, telling silence. And then the doorbell rang. Loud, sharp, urgent. Daniel froze. I froze. And in that suspended heartbeat, we both knew, before he even stood, before he even peeked through the curtain, who would be standing on the other side. Adana. Her shadow cast long and thin against my window, her posture stiff, her presence electric with anger. She had come for him, and for the first time I felt something powerful unfurl inside me. Not fear, not anxiety, but readiness, The storm that had been gathering inside me had finally reached the edge of breaking, and this time I would not be silent. Daniel turned to me, eyes wide with dread. "Mom, what do I do?" "Open the door," I said softly, "and let the truth in." Because the moment had come, not just for understanding, but for revelation, and I, an old woman dismissed as smelling of decay, was about to show them both exactly what strength smells like. Daniel hesitated at the door, his hand hovering just above the handle, as if touching it might set off an explosion, and in a way it would, just not the kind he feared. "Mom, she's angry," he whispered, his voice trembling, his eyes flickering with the wild panic of someone caught between two storms. But I was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that arrives only after a person has broken, rebuilt themselves quietly, and decided they would no longer bow to disrespect, no matter who delivered it. "Open it," I repeated softly. And so he did. The door swung wide, and there she stood, Adana, radiant in her fury, wrapped in a sleek beige blouse tucked into tailored trousers that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension. Her hair was immaculate, not a strand out of place, as if rage had no permission to wrinkle her polish. Her eyes, however, were sharp enough to slice through the thin air between us. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, the scent of her expensive perfume sweeping into my home like a declaration of superiority. Daniel stepped back instinctively, guilt blooming across his face, and I saw it. Oh, I saw it so clearly, the way she had trained that reaction into him. "Daniel," she snapped, not sparing me a glance, "we need to leave, now." Her tone was clipped, controlled, as if she were speaking to an employee who had strayed off script. Daniel swallowed hard. "Adana, I just came to talk to my mom." She raised a hand sharply, silencing him with a gesture so familiar, authority masquerading as partnership. "I don't care why you're here," she said coldly. "You left the house without telling me. And after everything we discussed this morning, I just needed—" "No," she cut in, her jaw tightening. "What you need is discipline, structure, consistency, not emotional manipulation from—" She stopped. Her eyes shifted toward me, and I saw it. The flicker of disdain, the curl of her lip, the way she scanned my home as if the very air offended her. "From this environment," she finished. "My home, my sanctuary, my years of memories, reduced to an environment." I clasped my hands gently in front of me, standing tall, allowing her gaze to sweep over me without flinching. "Good afternoon, Adana," I said calmly. She ignored the greeting. Instead, she took Daniel's arm, tightly, too tightly. "We are leaving," she ordered. His arm stiffened under her grip. He looked at me helplessly, like a child who had forgotten how to choose for himself. For a brief moment, I saw my son trapped inside an adult's body, scared, confused, desperate to avoid conflict. That was when I stepped forward, slow, deliberate, a mother reclaiming the space between manipulation and truth. "Daniel," I said softly, "sit down." Adana's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me?" "Sit down," I repeated, my voice steady, unwavering. "Your mother is speaking to you." The silence that followed was electric. Daniel's chest rose and fell quickly, his eyes darting between us. Adana let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh, a brittle sound, like glass about to crack. "You have no authority here," she said, stepping forward, her heels clicking against my floor like punctuation marks. "He's my husband, do you understand that? He belongs with me. Not sitting around in this old people's space absorbing negativity." Daniel flinched, and that was enough. Enough to ignite the fire I had been holding back. "Negativity?" I said, my voice low. "Is that what you call a mother's love?" "Love?" she echoed with a scoff. "Please, let's not pretend. What you do is guilt-tripping. You cling to him because you don't have a life of your own. You suffocate him with your emotional neediness, and honestly," she wrinkled her nose, "you don't understand how your presence affects people." Daniel closed his eyes in shame. I felt no shame. Not anymore. "Adana," I said gently, "do you really believe old age is a disease?" She folded her arms. "I believe decay is unpleasant, and yes, older people often carry that smell. It's just a fact. Some of us are more sensitive to it." "Sensitive?" I repeated softly. "Or intolerant?" Her eyes flashed. "I am not here to debate semantics with you." "No," I said quietly. "You are here because you realized you can control him at home, but you cannot control him here." She stiffened, her eyes narrowing. The truth had landed. You think I don't see it? I continued. How you isolate him, how you shape him, how you punish him with silence or criticism when he does anything that doesn't fit your world? Daniel's breath hitched. Mom, how you erase his past, I added, my gaze steady on her, including me. Adana's composure cracked, barely but enough. A twitch near her eye, a tightening of her mouth, a flicker of fear. Daniel, she said sharply, her voice rising, tell her that's not true. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because truth has a weight that cannot be denied once it lands. Tell her, she repeated, her voice cracking now, not with vulnerability but with panic. Daniel stared at the floor, lost in the battlefield between love and domination. I stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his trembling shoulder. Son, I whispered, what do you want? Not her, not me, you. Adana's mouth fell open in outrage. Daniel, if you don't come with me right now, then what? I asked, turning toward her fully. What will you do? Withdraw affection? Withdraw approval? Withdraw access to the life you curated for him? She blanched. You know nothing about our marriage. On the contrary, I said softly, I know exactly what fear looks like in a man, and my son is afraid. Daniel flinched as if struck. Tears welled in his eyes, actual tears, and Adana's face flooded with panic. Daniel, she said, softening her voice abruptly, stepping closer as if switching tactics, baby, you know I only want what's best for us, for our future. You know how much pressure I'm under. You know how hard I'm trying. You know I love you. Love? I whispered. Is love something you use as leverage? Her jaw clenched. Is love something you weaponize? You're twisting? Is love something you withhold? Enough, she snapped. Daniel stood abruptly, stepping between us, his chest heaving. Stop, he whispered. Both of you, stop. His voice shook, his hands shook. His entire being was unraveling from the weight of a war he never asked to fight. I can't keep doing this, he choked out. I'm tired, I am so tired. Adana reached for him. But he stepped back. It was small, barely noticeable. But I saw it. She saw it too, and her face hardened instantly. Daniel, she said, voice icy now, if you walk out of this house with her... This is my mother's house, he said, and the tremor in his voice made the words even stronger. Not her house, not your house, mine. My heart expanded in my chest, painful and hopeful all at once. Adana stared at him, stunned, then slowly fury burned through her composure like a flame licking through paper. So this is what you want, she hissed. To go backwards, to regress, to cling to someone who makes you feel like a child again. No, he whispered. I want to breathe. The silence after those 4 words was deeper than anything that had come before, and in that silence, the balance of power shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. Adana straightened, forcing control back into her posture. If you won't leave now, she said tightly, then I'll leave alone. Then you should go, Daniel said softly. She blinked, stunned. She hadn't expected that. Not today, not ever. Without another word, she turned sharply, heels clicking, and stormed out of my house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The moment she was gone, Daniel sank onto the sofa, covering his face with both hands, and I stood there, heart heavy with sorrow but full of an ancient, unbreakable resolve, because this was far from over. A storm had broken, but another was coming, and this time, I would be ready. Daniel sat on my sofa with his face buried in his palms, shoulders trembling, and for a long moment I simply watched him, my grown son. My once fearless boy, folded into himself like a child hiding from thunder. The room felt thick with silence, not the hollow silence of abandonment, but the heavy, suffocating silence that comes after a truth has burst open and left everyone raw. I wanted to reach for him, to cradle his head like I used to when fevers burned his skin or when nightmares stole his sleep, but I held myself back. He wasn't a child anymore, and he didn't need coddling. He needed clarity, strength, ground. Daniel, I whispered finally. He didn't look up. I'm sorry, he choked out, for everything, for her, for me, for the way things have been. A soft ache formed in my chest. Don't apologize for someone else's cruelty, I said gently. That is not your burden to carry. He wiped his face with shaking hands, staring at the floor like he didn't recognize his own life anymore. Mom, he whispered, I don't know who I am with her. I don't know how I became this person. I didn't even notice it happening. I moved closer, my voice low and steady. That is how control works. It doesn't come with a shout. It comes with a whisper, a suggestion, a correction here, a disapproval there. You don't realize you're changing until you're standing in a place you don't recognize. He breathed shakily. I feel trapped, but also guilty. She says I'm ungrateful, that I don't support her enough, that I'm not ambitious enough. She compares me to her friends' husbands, men who make more money, men who have more status, men who look like the kind of future she wants. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. And what about the future you want? His mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. That was answer enough. I exhaled slowly. Daniel, when you avoid yourself to please someone else, you begin to disappear, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize the person in the mirror is a stranger you never intended to become. His eyes glistened. I don't want to disappear, he whispered. Then you must stop shrinking, I said softly. You must stand, even if your knees shake. He looked at me, truly looked at me, as if seeing something he had forgotten, my strength, my history, my survival, the woman who had raised him with nothing but faith and worn hands. Mom, he whispered, I think I need help. Then you will get help, I said firmly, but this time not from the person who broke you. We sat there for a long time, sharing quiet breaths, letting the storm settle just enough for thought to form. Finally, he asked the question that revealed the core of his fear. Do you think she'll leave me? I inhaled deeply, my heart heavy with honesty. Maybe, I said, but if love leaves when you choose yourself, then it was never love. He bowed his head, absorbing the truth like a painful medicine. Minutes passed. Evening sunlight softened into gold, casting long, gentle shadows across the room, and I realized this was the first truly honest conversation we'd had in years. When he finally stood, wiping his eyes, he said, Mom, I need to go home. My breath caught. To her? He hesitated. To talk. I nodded. Conflict cannot be healed from a distance. Then go, I said softly, but go as yourself, not as the version she sculpted. He nodded slowly, kissed my forehead, and left with quiet determination. I watched from the window as he walked down the street toward his car, his steps unsure but moving nonetheless. When he drove away, the silence that returned to my home was different from the silence after he abandoned me. This silence felt like the pause between storm clouds shifting, uncertain but alive. The next 2 hours stretched like a held breath. I didn't pace, I didn't cry, I didn't pray, though I wanted to. Instead, I made tea, sat by the window, and waited with the patience only age can teach. And then my phone rang. Daniel, my heart clenched. Hello, I breathed, but it wasn't Daniel's voice I heard. It was hers, Adana, cold, controlled, coiled. Good evening, she said, though her tone carried no courtesy. This is Adana. I closed my eyes for a moment. Yes, I said calmly. I know. There was a brittle pause. Daniel told me he came to see you, she said, her voice level but trembling underneath. He said things. He told the truth, I replied. Truth can be misinterpreted, she snapped. Not when it comes from pain, I said softly. Silence again, longer this time, laden with something she didn't want to admit. I want to speak with you, she finally said, privately. I raised an eyebrow even though she couldn't see me. About what? About my marriage. Then speak with your husband. I am speaking with him, she said sharply, but he believes you are influencing him, and I need to understand exactly what you said. Everything I said, I murmured, was already living in him. I simply held up the mirror. Her breath hitched, barely noticeable, but enough. Can you come to the house? She asked stiffly. Now. I blinked. This was unexpected. Adana inviting me, the old woman she despised, the scent she couldn't tolerate, into her pristine, curated home? Why? I asked. Her voice lowered. Because I think you and I need to settle something. My spine straightened. What exactly do you want to settle? Daniel, she said simply, and where he belongs. Heat rose in my chest, not of anger but of something far more ancient, maternal fire. I will come, I said. Good, she replied quickly. Come alone. I always do, I said, and hung up before she could respond. I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of the invitation settle. A duel without swords, a confrontation between two women, one who built a man and one who wanted to own him. I rose, washed my face, and changed my wrapper to a fresh one, the soft blue patterned cloth Daniel bought me years ago for Mother's Day. a small gesture of memory. Then I stepped outside and began the walk to their estate. The air was cool, the night young, streetlights humming softly above me. As I approached their gate, the security man nodded respectfully. "Good evening, Ma." "Good evening," I replied. He let me in. I walked up the driveway toward the house illuminated with warm artificial light, beautiful, sterile, cold. When Adana opened the door, she looked different. Not softer, not kinder, but unsettled. Cracks in her perfection, eyes too bright, shoulders too tense. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. I entered slowly, letting my gaze drift across the immaculate living room, polished surfaces, white walls, a home curated for photographs, not memories. "Where is Daniel?" I asked. "Upstairs," she said. "I told him we needed a moment." "Does he agree with that?" She looked away. "He didn't fight it." "Ah, silence is compliance, like always." "So," I said, folding my hands gently, "what did you want to settle?" She swallowed hard, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face before she crushed it beneath her usual stiffness. "I want to understand what you did," she said. "What I did?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "Daniel walked into this house different, conflicted, questioning our marriage, questioning me. That didn't happen on its own. You planted something in him." I shook my head slowly. "I didn't plant anything, I simply uncovered what you buried." Her jaw tightened. "I am trying," she breathed, voice rising despite her effort to control it. "I'm trying to build a better life for us, to keep things clean, focused, progressive, but you—" Her voice cracked. "You pull him backward." And in that moment, for the first time, I saw it. The truth beneath her cruelty. Fear. But it wasn't fear of age, or scent, or decay. It was fear of inadequacy. Fear that Daniel's roots, the parts of him that came from me, were stronger than the shell she had tried to mold around him. That his loyalty to me threatened her control over him. That love he did not have to earn was harder to compete with than love she used as currency. She wasn't protecting her marriage. She was protecting her power. "Adana," I said quietly, "you're not afraid of losing Daniel to me." She stiffened. "You're afraid of losing control over him." Her eyes widened, barely, but enough to confirm everything. And then she whispered the truth she didn't mean to reveal. "I can't lose him." I stepped closer, my voice gentle but firm. "Then stop breaking him." Her breath trembled, her eyes glassed over, and for a moment, a single brief moment, the mask cracked. "I don't know how to be loved without earning it," she whispered. My heart softened, not in forgiveness, but in recognition. Broken people break others. Unhealed wounds bleed on those who never cut them. "Then don't make my son pay the price," I said softly. She looked away, tears threatening but refusing to fall. "Will you help him heal?" she whispered. "That is my life's work," I answered. "But you must decide whether you want to heal with him or hurt him again." Silence fell, deep, heavy, decisive. And in that silence, I realized this confrontation was not the end. It was the threshold. Something had shifted. Something had begun. And the storm within this marriage was far from over. For a long moment after my words settled in the air, Adana stood there stiff and trembling, her chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths, as if she were fighting some invisible current pulling her under. The polished confidence she wore like armor had thinned, revealing the fragile, frantic truth beneath it. A woman terrified of being unchosen, unadmired, unworthy. I felt no triumph in seeing it, only clarity. A clarity I wished had come sooner, before so much hurt had been sown between my son and me. She turned her face away, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was brittle and low. "I never meant to come between you two." I watched her carefully, my gaze steady. "But you did." She flinched, and for the first time she didn't respond with anger or defensiveness. She simply let the truth sit between us like a fragile glass on the brink of shattering. "You have to understand," she whispered, tightening her arms across her chest. "I grew up in a home where love was conditional, where if you weren't perfect, if you weren't useful, you were ignored, or criticized, or compared. Everything about me had to be polished, clean, powerful. Otherwise, I was nothing." I listened quietly, my heart softening with reluctant empathy. "So when Daniel came into my life," she continued, "he felt safe. He loved me easily. He loved me without measuring me against anything. But the moment he started drifting toward you again, my fears returned. I started thinking, If he feels at home with you, where do I fit? Ah, there it was. Not hatred of age, fear of replacement, fear that the love I gave effortlessly was stronger than the love she had to perform for. Adana, I said softly, a mother's love and a wife's love are not competitors. They wear different faces, but they come from the same place: care, loyalty, connection. She looked down. It didn't feel that way. That is because you treated love like a scarce resource, I said gently. But love multiplies. It does not divide. A long silence followed, and then she whispered, I pushed him too hard, didn't I? Yes, I answered honestly. You pushed him until he bent so far he stopped recognizing himself. She inhaled shakily. I was trying to make him better. You were trying to make him yours, I corrected. She closed her eyes, tears finally escaping. I don't want to lose him, she whispered. Then you must love him, I said, not the idea of him. There was a soft sound behind us, the quiet creak of the staircase. We both turned. Daniel stood on the last step, his face pale, his eyes red, his posture defeated, yet somehow stronger than I had seen in months. He had heard everything. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence felt like the air right before rain, a tension that promised cleansing or flooding. Slowly he stepped forward. Adana, he said softly. She wiped her cheeks quickly, as if ashamed of her tears. Daniel, I'm sorry. His expression flickered, pain, longing, confusion, exhaustion all wrapped into one. Why didn't you just tell me, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me you were scared? She looked broken, her voice trembling. Because I didn't know how. I only knew how to control, how to correct, how to perfect things so they wouldn't hurt me later. He closed his eyes briefly, gathering himself. That's not partnership, he said. That's prison. She inhaled sharply, tears spilling freely now. I know, and I don't want to be that person anymore. He looked at her the way a person looks at a storm, half wanting to trust it, half terrified of being destroyed by it again. I need space, he whispered, her face crumpled. Daniel. Not forever, he added softly, but enough to breathe, enough to remember who I am. Fear gripped her features, but she nodded slowly, painfully. If that's what you need, I'll give it. He exhaled a shuddering breath as if those words loosened a rope that had long been tightening around his chest. I watched them silently, my heart aching for both of them, for the love that had been twisted by insecurity, and for the young marriage that had lost its footing before it fully found its shape. Mom, Daniel said suddenly, turning toward me with eyes full of hesitant remorse. I'm sorry I let things get this bad. I stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his cheek. You came back, I whispered. That is what matters. His eyes filled with tears. Can I stay with you for a few days, just to clear my head? I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through my chest, a warmth I had thought I might never feel again. My home is always your home, I whispered. Always. Adana's gaze dropped to the floor, pain flickering across her face. But for the first time, her pain wasn't wrapped in entitlement or anger. It was raw, human, sincere. Ma, she whispered uneasily, lifting her eyes to me. Thank you for speaking to me honestly, even though it must have been hard. I stepped closer, not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as a woman who had lived long enough to recognize another woman's wounds. Heal yourself, I told her softly, so you can love without fear. She nodded, tears dripping onto her hands. I'll try. And for the first time since I met her, I believed she meant it. Daniel packed a small bag while Adana remained downstairs, standing in the center of her pristine living room, shaken, humbled, and perhaps finally aware of the truth that had eluded her. Control is not love. When he came down with his bag, she stepped toward him. Call me, she whispered. Even if it's just to tell me you're okay. He nodded, hesitated, then gently squeezed her hand, a soft, fragile gesture of connection. Not reconciliation. Not yet. As we walked toward the door, she called after him softly. I do love you, Daniel. I just didn't know how to show it without losing myself. He paused. Then learn, he said gently. And I'll learn too. She nodded, wiping her eyes again. We left the house quietly, stepping into the cool evening air. As we reached the gate, Daniel finally exhaled a long breath, as if he had been holding it for years. Mom, he whispered, thank you. I slipped my hand into his arm, grounding him. A mother never stops fighting for her child, I said softly. even when the child forgets how to fight for himself. He leaned into me slightly, like he used to as a boy, and together we walked home. When we reached my house, he paused at the doorway, the same doorway he had once avoided, the same doorway he had once left in shame. But now he stepped inside with something closer to peace. As he set his bag down, he turned to me with a small, tired smile. "Mom?" "Yes, my son. I think I want to heal. Not just the marriage, me. I want to be whole." My throat tightened. "Then you are already on your way." That night, as he slept in his old room, still painted the soft blue he chose at 16, I sat in the living room with my tea and allowed myself to breathe. Really breathe. For months I'd carried sorrow like a stone inside my chest. Tonight that stone had cracked. Not dissolved, not vanished, but cracked enough for light to slip through. The next morning, Daniel woke with clearer eyes. He helped me cook breakfast, laughed softly at an old joke, and asked about things he had forgotten he used to love: music, books, the garden we once tended together. We didn't talk about Adana that day. Healing doesn't begin with digging deeper into the wound. Healing begins with remembering you are still alive. Over the next week, he rested, reflected, returned slowly to himself. Adana called occasionally. Brief check-ins, no pressure, no demands. She was giving him space. To my surprise, she even sent a message once. "Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see." Change had begun. Not guaranteed, not perfect, but real. And on the 7th morning, Daniel came to me with a soft, steady resolve in his eyes. "Mom," he said, "I think I'm ready to talk to her. Not to go back blindly, but to rebuild, carefully, honestly." I nodded. "That is your choice. And I support you. Will you be there for me as I figure it out?" I took his hands in mine. "I never left," I said, "even when you walked away." "I never left." He swallowed thickly, emotion tightening his throat. "I love you, Mom." A tear slipped down my cheek, warm, healing, grateful. "And I love you, my son." We stood like that for a moment, mother and child, pain and healing, loss and restoration, bound by a love age, cannot diminish. Later that day, he went to meet Adana. They talked for hours, not shouting, not blaming, talking, listening, understanding, and when he returned, he hugged me tightly. "We're going to counseling," he said, "together and separately." I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally being faced. Over the next months, their marriage slowly reshaped itself, not around control, but around communication, not around fear, but around truth. Some days were hard, some days were hopeful, some days were painful, but necessary. But Daniel was no longer disappearing. He was growing, becoming himself again, and Adana, slowly, humbly, began learning what love really meant. And me? I realized something. Aging is not decay. Aging is strength. Aging is clarity. Aging is power earned through survival. Daniel visited me often now, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of choice. And every time he stepped into my home, I felt the quiet victory of a mother who refused to stop loving, even when love was bruised. One evening, months later, as we sat on the veranda drinking tea, Daniel turned to me with a soft smile. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Thank you for reminding me where I come from." I squeezed his hand. "Never forget," I said. "Roots do not weaken a tree. They strengthen it." He nodded. And as the sun set in golden hues across the sky, I felt peace settle into my bones, steady, warm, complete. My son had come home. His heart had returned, and I, the old woman once dismissed for smelling of age, had proven one timeless truth. The strength of a mother does not fade. It deepens. And when the world tries to pull her child away, she does not break. She rises. I'm really glad you're here, and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.